Hello friends, welcome to the Take Better Photos channel. In this video, we're going to be counting down the top 5 RAW editors for HDR merging. So in 2022, there are more RAW editors than ever which support HDR, and that's good news for us who love the eye-popping images that HDR produces. But with more and more products having HDR, which one should we be getting? That's what we're going to answer in today's video. As always, we're going to be starting with the criteria. The following are going to be used to evaluate the RAW editor. So the first is the quality of HDR processing. The tone mapping process should produce great images out of the box, which doesn't require excessive editing, and it should look great for both RAW and JPEG exposures. Number 2 is its editing capability. The RAW editor should allow you to improve the tone, color, detail of the HDR and take advantage of the greater dynamic range present in an HDR image. And number 3 are other features. This will cover things like ghost removal, noise reduction, and the interface. For fair comparison, we're going to be testing each software with the same set of images. The images will include both RAW and JPEG, daytime and nighttime images, and even an image to test for ghost removal. For easier comparison, we're not going to be including price as a factor in this list. Finally, remember to stick around till the end as we are going to be showing a slideshow comparison of all the HDR images so you can judge for yourself which one produces the best HDR images. So let's get right into this. At number 5 is OnOne Photo RAW 2022. So OnOne Photo RAW costs around $100 US. So let's tone map some images with OnOne Photo RAW. Merging the HDR is pretty easy. You simply select the photos like so, then just right click and then just choose Create HDR, and you can see that the result is pretty natural looking, and it also allows you to preview before saving, which is a good thing. And you can make adjustments before you actually save the image, or you can reject it outright. It has some options for deghosting here. All right, so let's just put this at low, since nothing much was moving in this image. It has, of course, automatic alignment as well. And it has very good panel for adjustments. So one of the nice things about OnOne is it has 2 panels for adjusting your HDR. You have the tone and color panel here. As you can see here, the adjustments are pretty targeted. So if I adjust the highlights here, you can see how nicely it makes use of the data in the HDR to bring back the highlights. It has a structure here which allows you to bring in more detail into the image, and then you have an haze adjustment here as well, similar to what you get in the RAW editing panel. It also has another panel called HDR Look, which allows you to adjust things like the compression of the image. So compression brings back more detail in the shadows and highlights, and you have a clarity adjustment as well, which also helps to bring out local contrast. So very comprehensive editing panel is one of the good things about OnOne's HDR merging. The nice thing here is you can cancel if you don't like the way this was mapped, or you can just save this accordingly. So I'm just going to save this. So there you have it. So that's a pretty nice looking image from OnOne. What are some of the cons for OnOne? So let's just merge some other images here. All right, so let's just merge this sunset photo and look at the results. So these are all raw files, as you can see here. So let's just create HDR. And so this is the HDR output here. So you can see pretty much the main criticism I have for OnOne is for this type of image, the image does lack contrast and detail. You can see the sky here looks washed out, and so it looks like a real low contrast image. You could choose some other options here, auto, surreal, or surreal auto. Okay, so maybe a surreal looks a little bit better. Yeah, definitely better. So we'll choose surreal here, and let's add a little bit of contrast here by enhancing the clarity like so, and maybe the detail a little bit like so as well. Okay, so if we can save that. All right, so this is the result I got. Okay, so it's pretty good result, except that I still find that the sky looks washed out here. So now let's test the ghosting performance of OnOne. As you can see, there's this lady here which is actually moving. Let's see how OnOne will handle that. So we're going to just select all of these things. Let's just create the HDR. All right, I'm going to set the ghosting to very high here and see the results, and just click save. So nice thing about OnOne is the colors look very natural, and the main issue here is that the ghosting, even at a very high mode, doesn't look great. at all. So this is very hard to clean up. And so if you have any moving objects, OnOne just doesn't handle it well at all. Okay, finally, let's look at its JPEG performance. So this is just a few JPEG files here. And let's just create the HDR. And that's how it looks like. So as you can see here, its JPEG performance is not great. Right? So it loses a lot of contrast. It's actually worse than the original image here. All right, so the colors are a bit too vivid. The whole thing looks washed out. It loses a lot of detail as well. Right, so its JPEG performance is not great based on this photo right here. So that's OnOne. So ad number 4 is Affinity Photo. So Affinity Photo costs around 55 USD. So let's merge some photos in Affinity Photo. So to create the HDR, you just basically go to File, HDR Merge, and then just click Add here. Alright, so as you can see here, the 5 images have been imported, and Affinity has capability to align images as well as do some noise reduction and also remove ghosts. And then let's just click OK to that and see how it looks like. Alright, so here's the tone map image. As you can see, it's very good, very natural looking, and has a lot of nice detail. Something nice about Affinity Photo is it has its presets here on the left side, and so you can just basically choose a look that you want. I usually choose the detailed look, which makes the image pop a little bit more. Affinity Photo also has very nice HDR specific tools, like the tone compression tool really does work. If you want to make something a little bit more natural, then you can use this tone compression tool. It also has this local contrast tool here to again add more detail into the shot, as you would expect with HDR. As you can see here, Affinity Photo has not corrected the distortion of this camera. This was shot with an RX 100 Mark VI camera. So you would have to go into Develop Persona to correct that. So to correct this, you could go into its lens, right? And then you can just correct the distortion here, or you can just adjust the scale. Okay, so I can just adjust the scale here like so, and that's corrected. A bigger problem with Affinity's image, it's the lack of color. For an HDR, this has very dull looking colors. You can see the sun loses the orange. So it is more dull looking than its competitors. So I recommend you add a little bit of saturation here, right, to make the image look a little bit better. Another issue with Affinity is in this develop panel, you don't have selective color adjustments. So if you want to correct just the orange, saturate that. It's not available in this panel. You'd have to go to the photo persona, which is a lot more work than it should be. Alright, so let's check out how Affinity handles ghosting. Some images here. So as you can see, I'm going to check here, automatically remove ghosts. That's the only option for ghosting Affinity has. Okay, so I'm just going to select these photos, click open. Alright, and let's just click OK here, and let's see how it looks like. So here's the result of the ghosting. So as you can see here, Affinity didn't do a fantastic job because this lady is headless. And so this will be a little bit tougher to remove as well. And you can see here that the movement of this policeman was also not handled properly. Not great deghosting, so I wouldn't recommend Affinity if you have moving objects. Next, let's look at its night photos performance. Alright, so this is the tone map for Affinity Photo for this night image. You can see that it's quite easy to improve this image by just choosing one of the presets here. You can just choose here, let's say detailed here. I think detailed looks the best. They also have cool and natural. I prefer the detailed look. The main issue with Affinity is its editing of its HDR is the least effective in this list. So as you can see, if I adjust the shadows for this, okay, if I make it zoom in, right, if I adjust it, you can see that it doesn't really look great. And we have to take into account this is an HDR file. It's supposed to have a ton of data, and this is just the way it adjusts the shadow. So this is the worst looking adjustment out there because it just reduces the contrast. The highlights is similarly bad. Bright lamppost here I want to reduce. I would lower this like that, and you can see it reduces all the contrast as well. So not very smart shadows and highlights adjustments. That's a negative for Affinity. However, what's strong about Affinity is its local contrast here. Okay, you can add a lot more detail, better than I think its competitors. Now let's look at its performance for JPEG images. Okay, so this is the tone mapping of Affinity for JPEG. I think pretty good, right? Very natural looking. Okay, though it's ghosting, could use a little bit more work. But overall, I think a very well done tone mapping. And again, you can enhance the detail with this preset, make it look better. I think I would like to enhance the details of the sky, so you can adjust the local contrast here to make it look a little bit better. Okay, so not a bad look. So let's move on to the next one. So at number 3 is CaptureOne. So let's look at CaptureOne's tone mapping. So to create the HDR, you simply have to select it, then right click, and then just choose merge to HDR, and then it will auto adjust and auto align. There are no options for deghosting. So let's take a look at this merge photo from CaptureOne. Alright, so this is CaptureOne's output. So the nice thing about CaptureOne is the images look very natural. It doesn't look like it's an HDR processed image. It also maintains very good blacks in the image, as you can see here. In terms of editing, so let's say we try to adjust the highlights. Let's say the sky is a little bit washed out. So when we reduce the highlights here, you can see that it nicely targets the sky, and it actually makes the image a lot more striking. So that's one nice thing about CaptureOne, is the tone adjustment tools really recover great detail here, and that goes as well for its shadows adjustment, which looks very good, very targeted, right? So you have very nice control with CaptureOne. All right, so let's test its ghosting performance. So as you can see, there are no options for ghosting. So this is a really simple interface. So this is the image produced by CaptureOne. Now, the nice thing about this is it handled the ghosting a lot better than both OnOne and Affinity. Now, there is a little bit of artifacts here, but that can easily be removed. It's not as difficult to work with than previous HDR editors. Now, the main issue here is it did not brighten up this shadow area, but with its editing tools, you can actually bring that back pretty easily. And same thing again with the highlights here. You can really make it look nicer. You can make the sky look nicer by simply adjusting the highlight slider here. Now let's try out a night photo. Right, so let's merge this night photo here. Okay, so the merging, again, very nicely done. Very natural looking, nice looking color. And once again, the only complaint I have is this line here. The detail could have been brought back a little bit better, but not a problem, because again, we can use the adjustment tools of CaptureOne to bring that back. Now, the only concern I have is compared to OnOne, this sign, it seems like it has more problems bringing back more detail. I would have preferred this to be a bit darker. So compared to the others, it could not bring the highlights back from its adjustment panel. And finally, let's look at how it handles JPEG. Oh, okay. So the main issue now with this JPEG is CaptureOne does not support JPEG. That's the biggest downer about CaptureOne. So if you ever try to merge it, it's going to say selected photos are not suitable for HDR merge. So let's move on to the next one. Number 2 is Luminar. So Luminar's HDR merge is the newest entry into the field of HDR. All right, so now let's merge with Luminar. The way you merge with Luminar is more unique than its competitors. So what you do there is you select first the images that you want to merge, right? You drag it into this box here, right? So, okay, so you drag it into this box, but you have to click on this, and then you have to turn on auto alignment, then ghost reduction, and we'll just set it at medium here. The main problem with this interface is you would expect that all of these things would be turned on by default, but for whatever reason, they're unchecked. So you could have very ugly looking images if you do that. So always double check and make sure that these two are clicked. So let's just merge this. All right, so the merging is done. So it looks like a very flat, low contrast image, but the images were properly aligned. All right. And so the nice thing about Luminar is its editing tools work really well with the HDR images it produces. So if you click on edit here, right, you can actually adjust the structure here. It works pretty well with there, as you can see here. So if I adjust this, so it works really well with the output. See that? It really brings back the detail, makes the images pop. So as you can see, the sky now looks very balanced with the foreground here. And you can enhance this further with this enhance tool here. Just add an accent there if you want. And that looks really nice. So the colors are pretty good, pretty natural. And of course, you could enhance that a little bit more. One drawback of Luminar is you can see this image which was taken with an RX 106. It's not corrected. Every other editor seemed to know how to correct this, but Luminar does not correct this. But that's pretty easy as well. You just simply have to go to the develop and just go into optics and then just change the distortion here. Now let's look at ghost reduction. Again, drag that in here, and then we are going to make sure that this is checked. Okay, we're going to set the ghost reduction to high here. All right. And then we're just going to merge. All right, so this is the output. So you can see it did a great job with ghost reduction, right? As you can see, you don't have any ghosts. Pretty much, it did eliminate it. And again, it's a little bit flat looking image, but again, it works pretty well. To add a little bit of structure, let's just add a little bit of that to enhance the contrast, and then add a little bit of enhance here, right? To do that. So there it looks much nicer now. If you want something more dramatic, you could do that as well. Okay, and you also have a sky enhancer there. which makes it look really nice. So very easy to improve the look of this image. Okay, now let's look at its editing performance. Let's just merge this night image. Okay, so this is the output. Once again, the tone map result has this thing a little bit too bright. So we're going to check whether the editing tools can bring this back. So again, we'll just go into edit mode here and we'll just go to develop and then let's reduce the highlight. And you can see that this is the weakest point of Luminar. Its highlights tool does not take into account the extra data and it can't bring back the detail. And finally, let's look at its JPEG performance. This is the image that's generated. This is the TIFF file. So a very nice looking render. And you can again improve that. So you can see how nicely that's brought back some of the details. And we can also use the enhance here to further enhance it. So this is probably the best looking image so far for JPEG. And Luminar does a great job. At number 1 is Adobe Lightroom. Alright, so with Lightroom, let's merge some of these photos now. So we just select these 5 photos and then we just click Photo Merge HDR. So one nice thing about Lightroom is it does have this preview pane. Very natural looking images, very good color and contrast. The sky though is washed out. It has also very good editing tools here. So in terms of the highlights, you can see that it was probably the best at recovering detail and taking advantage of the dynamic range in the image. I would have preferred though that it go a little bit further to bring back the sky here. It has an excellent clarity adjustment as well, which can be used to make the image pop a little bit more. It has a very good dehaze panel as well if you want to use that. So overall, its editing tools and its tone mapping is very natural and colorful. Let's look at its deghosting performance. So Lightroom did a great job of keeping this lady here and removing all the ghosts. However, in this tone mapping, you can see that it did not make use of the brighter exposure properly. It looks like it used the darker exposure to remove the ghost. And even though it was successful in getting rid of the ghosts, the whole thing became very noisy because it didn't take advantage of the brighter exposure. That is a flaw in the tone mapping of Lightroom, I would think. Again, we can adjust the clarity here and bring back a little bit of the detail. Okay, so let's just look at the night shot. So if you go to develop here and adjust the highlights, you can see that it really recovers a dynamic range better than any other editor, right? And that's why we're putting this at number 1. Its adjustments and its handling of the HDR data is the best. Not to mention that the look of the image is very colorful and natural, and this is probably the best looking output among the bunch. And finally, let's see how it handles JPEG. Alright, so this is the result. Now this is overly colorful in my view, so this requires a little bit more work. Because of its editing, I would give Lightroom as the best HDR merging in a RAW editor. But don't take my word for it. So right now, we're going to do a final slideshow comparison demonstrating the HDR merging of each of the photo editors. So you can be the judge on which one was the best. So there you have it. Those are the top 5 RAW editors for HDR merging. Do you agree or disagree? I'd like to hear from you. And if you found this video helpful, I'd really appreciate if you subscribe, like, and share this content to help keep the videos coming. And till the next video, I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.